Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is How to Drum and Bass, and today we're gonna be making this sound, which is the bass hit of the super popular song Recombine by Culture Shock and Sub Focus. We're gonna make this as it was a request from one of you guys, and as you know, I am here to serve you. So let's have a look at what we're going to do. Before we do, please know that you can download this as a free preset right in the link in the description. But if you're looking for sounds like this, 100 plus or maybe 150 plus sounds like this that'll fit right into your drum and bass production, then maybe consider having a look at our Drum and Bass Essentials preset pack for Serum, which contains every sound of every caliber you need to produce drum and bass of any genre. All right, without further ado, let's move along and see how we're gonna do this. So, just for context, we're doing this song called Recombine. We're taking the bass hit, or it's not really a bass hit, it's more like an alarm type lead sound, I guess, and it sounds. So what we can hear there is a sort of it feels like an air alarm to me. I used to play Sonic the Hedgehog, and whenever you were in Dr. Eggman's lair and you got discovered, I think this is the exact sound that they would play. But hey, let's put it in drum and bass. Who the hell cares? So by itself, just really quickly, this is what it sounds like. Right, and this is what we have got. So let's have a look at what we're going to make today. Well, we have two things. We have a very simple sub, and this sub is actually a preset from the Drum and Bass Essentials preset pack. So go and check that out if you want this awesome sub. The sub by itself sounds like this. So we're not gonna dive too much into the sub. We're gonna dive into, the alarm sound. Let's call it a honk or an alarm itself. And that sounds like this. And so actually this sound is not so difficult in the bass, but we can do some things to change it. Let's have a look at what the end product would be, and then we're gonna make it from scratch. So we have this Serum patch here, and the Serum patch is a monster wavetable and this dist 8-bit FWOP, but what you should know is you don't need those. Actually, this is supposed to kind of be a sine wave, and this is supposed to kind of be a triangle wave, except they're just a little bit more distorted. And that's, we're gonna dive into why we're doing that as we go. And all that's happening really is that we have this sine wave being FM'd quite a bit from this triangle wave. We have some creative filtering going on here to accentuate some resonant frequencies. And then in the effects, we're gonna be applying a reverb filter and a bunch of distortion. And then in post-processing, we're kind of going to do the same thing. We're going to do some compression. We might do some distortion. And then with another Serum effects, we're actually gonna add some more filtering, as well as what you see here, which we'll get into, some volume distortion, which is an interesting concept. So let's dive into how to make this from scratch. All right, so we have a simple Serum patch here. It is playing at the note D sharp 3. The note matters a lot because of the intonation of the alarm honk sound. And so, not very interesting right now. So we're gonna start out with the basic building blocks. Right here, we want a sine wave. We'll start with that so that we get the general idea, and then we'll switch over to these slightly more interesting wavetables a bit later. So yeah, we wanna have basic shapes on both of these basically. One of them at a sine wave and one of them at a triangle wave. And immediately we wanna get some FM from B, because that's the main thing that we're gonna be doing here. And we're gonna put this sine wave at -3. Right. And we're gonna start applying some FM from B. So you can hear that we're sort of getting a little bit of that grittiness in there, which is what the FM is doing. It's interfering, right? So yeah, this is kind of where we want to go. And we can adjust this to taste later, but let's put it at about 50%. Then we're going to be distorting that. So let's also add some noise here so that comes in nicely with the distortion. Let's pick the bright white, just because I like that a lot. And yeah, let's do one-shot mode. Now, we don't actually need the level of this triangle wave. We're only gonna let it modulate. Cool. So we're basically just getting this FM'd sine wave here. Well, first things first, we don't really need the low end of this. So let's go into the effects and let's get the EQ out here. And let's just low cut this. And we don't need this little bump here either. So let's take down the Q. Cool. Then next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna be doing some filtering. Now, I'm just gonna put this here and turn it off, because let's start filtering here first. So what we want is, we want to accentuate two little bumps here. And those bumps are also going to sort of matter in how the timbre of the sound is going to be, because obviously they're going to be accentuating some frequencies above the fundamental, right? Above what what note you're playing. And for that, we're going to pick in this multi menu here, we're going to pick the HP, which is basically a low cut filter, but it has this added little bump, and you don't really start seeing that unless you put up this resonance. So let's do that. And you see here now we have two peaks basically that we can move. So this one we're going to put somewhere here, and the next one we're going to put quite close to that, but this one is going to help us in changing the sound a little bit. It's almost as if we're sort of adding a little bit of a Foreman property here. So let's put them quite close together, and let's give them a little bit of extra resonance. We can turn down this noise a bit. We don't need that much of it. And then we're going to put this filter in here. Now, so what we want is we want to have either like Combs filter or a reverb filter here. I chose the reverb filter because I think it sounds the nicest, but essentially what we want is something with lots of peaks and troughs. So if we turn up this cutoff, and we got to turn up the resonance as well, and we put the cutoff somewhere here, this cutoff is actually also going to give us a nice little amount of control of the timbre of the sound. But this is going to be accentuated more once we apply some more effects. So let's move on to that. Let's do some distortion, and let's put it on the soft clip. That's quite nice. Cool. We're getting there. We're getting sort of half close. And so this sound has a slight metallic ring to it. It really does sound like it was produced by some kind of robotic alarm thing. And one way that we can emulate that is by getting a delay and unlinking the BPM, or well, from the BPM. And yeah, let's link it here so that we move them at the same time. And let's put this at something super fast. And let's increase that feedback a little bit. Maybe that's a bit too much. And then let's only get those upper tonalities here. This will just add a slight touch once we add in the reverb, but it's basically going to give it like a little bit of a reverberating sort of metallic little tail in a minute. Now let's make sure to put it on ping pong as well, so that we put that a little bit more in the stereo field here. Hey, quick break. If you're enjoying these videos and you like my style of teaching and you've been feeling like you want to get more into sound design, specifically for drum and bass, then maybe you want to check out my brand new online course called Drum and Bass Sound Design Mastery. It's an absolutely massive course with over 150 videos spanning 14 hours of content, where we teach you two things. In the first half, we teach you everything there is to know about synthesizing sound in Serum. And in the second part, we show you how to use that knowledge to create the most popular sounds in drum and bass. I guess you can see it like the ultimate masterclass of drum and bass sound design. So if that sounds like something you could be interested in, check the link in the description below to find out more about this awesome course. All right, let's get on with the video. Now, before we move on, let's actually add something in post-production real quick. Let's add a reverb, because a big part of this sound is reverb. And as we're creating it, since we already know it's going to be very reverb, it might be nice to actually have that around. Right? So that's already, you can kind of feel like it's sounding metallic now, but it's also a powerful sound. So what we want to do is we want to do like a bit of a reverb throw type thing. So let's zoom in a little bit on this. And a lot of people don't actually know this, but if you press this little triangle here, you actually get all of the controls from any external plugin or any Ableton plugin really. And we can just click this mix here and we can go and automate it. And so let's put it somewhere around this half. And whatever we want our mix to be, we only want it to kick in over there. So let's do something like this. What that means is the first part of the sound is not going to be reverb. So it's not going to be drowned basically, and it's going to remain its snappiness and the grit that we're going to be creating later. And by the way, if you're confused as to like, hey, we're adding a reverb here, but wait, what about this thing here, then the reverb filter? It's an interesting topic. So the reverb filter is actually not a reverb itself. It's a part of what's being used in a reverb. And in a reverb plugin, a lot more happens. That filter actually like kind of moves, and there's dissipation, as we call it. It's a whole deep topic by itself, but they're not the same thing. If you do want to learn more about that, we talk a lot about all the types of filters, and especially also this reverb filter and some really cool things to do with it in our flagship course, which I'll tell you about later in this video. For now, let's move on. So the only thing that we want to do is we want to compress this a little bit, just to give it a little bit more volume. Cool. And then what we could do before we compress it or after we compress it is add some hyper. I'm going to choose to put both of these at 0 so we can modulate it later. And this is just to add width, right? It's just going to make it more stereo. Right now, we don't necessarily want it, but we could go back in later and dial that in. Right. So we're getting close, but it needs to be a little bit more grittier, and yeah, we just need to do some additional processing for it to sound full and less boring, I guess. All right, so we were using these basic shapes wavetables, right? But you saw in the end product that we viewed earlier that I used some different wave shapes. And the reason for that is this. What we're creating now is essentially an FM sine wave. And so that means that the end product relies heavily on different types of distortion that are added onto it. And we can do that in post-production, right? We can add an erosion, we can add a overdrive, we can add a saturation or multiband saturation. That's all cool. But if you can add that earlier in the process, which you can do by changing the wavetables around a little bit, that sometimes sounds cooler and often also a little bit more original because you'll not be using the same saturation plugin that everybody uses, and it's not going to sound the same. So actually within all the spectral wavetables, there are quite some wavetables that are like the basic shapes, but just more distorted. It's almost as if they're like already slightly FM'd versions of that. And so Monster 1, for example, is a really great example. If you move the wavetable up here, you can kind of see that once we reach somewhere around 75%, this is basically a distorted sine wave. And it's going to make it sound a bit more gritty. And we can do the same thing for this basic shapes here. This is a triangle wave. But there are options here that are just like a triangle wave, but more distorted, more squiggly in the lines, basically. And so in the digital wavetable as well, we have dist 8-bit FWAP. And this is actually pretty much a distorted triangle wave. As you can see, boom, boom, boom. And so we can play a little bit with what the wavetable position should be. But I think something like that sounds cool. And remember, all of these parameters are just stuff that you can change to make it sound slightly different and to maybe, you know, after we're done recreating this song by Focus, to make it a little bit more your own. And so all this is going to do is it's just going to give us a slightly less boring sound. All right, so the first thing that you could do, this is optional, but I like to do it, is grab a multi-band plugin. So Ableton has a stock one, which is called Multi-Band Dynamics. And what I want to do is I want to take some of these mids, right? You can drag this bar here upwards. And if you then click it and you go up or down with your cursor, you can do what is called upwards compression. And so what this is going to do is it's going to take the, in this case, the mid frequencies that are not so loud out of this whole sound, and it's going to bring them up. And it's just going to make the sound a little bit fuller. Let's drag it up a little bit more. Cool. And we can always adjust that later if we want to. Then next, let's have a quick listen, because basically our alarm right now sounds a little bit too dark, as in the exact tonality of whatever comes after the fundamental is a little bit too much on this side and needs to be a little bit brighter. It needs to be a little bit more in the higher frequency spectrum. So what we can actually do with sounds like this, if we want to do that, we can actually just take a pitch shifter basically. And one that you could use for this is M Auto Pitch. It's a free plugin, and basically it has this little button here called Form and Shift, with which we can sort of change the formants, right? So we can change the, yeah, let's call it the intonation of it. So let's really quickly, let's put this EOS2 at the end, because we always want the reverb at the end. And let's turn it off real quick so we can hear what we're doing here a little bit more properly. Without it on, like at 0, this is what we got so far. If we turn this knob, you can hear it's still going to be playing D#1 or whatever note we're playing, but it's going to change the rest of that sound. So if this is the whole frequency spectrum, it's going to keep this part, the fundamental, but whatever is here, it's going to shift it up or down. And that's pretty cool, because we can create a brighter sound without having to meddle in the Serum oscillators and like add semitones to one of them or whatever, because that's not always that accurate. So we can just choose to add a little bit of this formant shifting here, which is going to matter a lot. All right, now just in general, what I want to do is I want to go and accentuate a little bit of the mid frequencies, and we're going to put that after this auto pitch. So we've shifted the content basically now of the frequencies that are being played, and I want to go ahead and accentuate a little bit of the stuff that we moved. So let's take away some of this, right? Like we don't really need this because we're going to have a sub playing separately. And let's take a little bell curve here and sort of accentuate maybe, yeah, around. So that's going to make it sound too tinny. So we want to be somewhere in this area. And maybe we can turn down that Q a bit as well, or turn it up, sorry. Cool. So it'll just become a little bit more aggressive. And in the same effort, we can go and compress this sound slightly, just so that we get something a little bit louder, because it is quite an aggressive sound, right? So put on the makeup. All right, so now we have a little bit more of an aggressive. By the way, if you're wondering what that is in the back, that's just, if you stop the sound early, that's the delay plugin delaying this sudden stop, basically. You can ignore that. If you let the sound play for full, it doesn't do that. All right, cool. So another thing that we can do, which I really love to do, is volume distortion. So we're going to grab a Serum effects, and basically what we're going to do is just at the end, just before the reverb, right? And if we were to add any other post-production, we would add it before this on the chain. We're going to go here, we're going to activate the noise. And recently, it hasn't always been this way, but there's this audio in option on Serum effects, which is really sick. And basically, it's just going to feed the audio into the Serum effects. And if you click Note Latch, you can actually apply LFOs on this noise oscillator. The noise oscillator is now not playing noise, it's actually playing the entire incoming signal from here, which is really cool. Because what we can do now is we can take this LFO and apply it to the level here, right? And basically this just acts like another instance of Serum now. We could even, by the way, if you want to know about this, add another oscillator, which is absolutely crazy, but we're not going to do that right now. And so what I want to do is I want to unlink this and put it at a pretty high BPM. And you can hear, so this is super rapid volume automation, it is going to give a very raspy sound. That is if we put these two endpoints all the way at the bottom, but we're not going to do that. Let's do this a little bit faster. And then also, let's put this on trigger mode. And we can play around a little bit with how much we wanted to distort that. And by the way, so while we're doing this is we want to create a little bit more grit, a little bit more of that ness in the sound, right? So that it sounds a bit more sort of gritty, really. And so we can make sure that this LFO, it will be playing at about 25% level. And then we can sort of, you know, so it won't actually like completely take out all the volume, but we can use these to adjust sort of how much we want. And so this is cool because what you can hear now, let's turn this off, right, versus, so it's going to do that part, which I think personally is very cool, can be very powerful, and also it puts more movement in the sound, so it makes it a little bit less boring. Cool. Basically, we're almost there. This is already pretty much a very similar sound. And now what you can go and do is you can go and look, do you want to add more filtering to this, right? So you could go and say, hey, I want to make this a little bit more distorted or not. Adding saturation to this can work, but when you're working with FM sine waves, a lot of the times it gets very intense, very fast. Like let's say I put a saturator on here. Right, like it gets pretty aggressive pretty quickly. You definitely can, and maybe you should. But another thing that you can do is you can go ahead and add another Serum effects. And by the way, since we're doing volume automation, you also want to put that at the end of the chain. So you really do just want to put that before the reverb, because if you change anything about the sound that affects the volume in any way, shape, or form, which includes EQing and adding filters that have peaks and troughs, you're kind of undoing a little bit of that volume automation, right? So you want to put that at the end of the chain. Let's make things a little bit more visual and use this filter right here. So we have to, of course, do this noise in thing again and press Note Latch so that it runs through. And then we can go and grab, like for example, another reverb filter. And so if you were confused about the reverb filter before, this is it. This is basically what it does. It adds these peaks and troughs, which you can control with this resonance point here. So usually I find with sounds that are not necessarily like big basses is that you want to put the cutoff up a little bit. And this drive you have to be careful with because it actually boosts a lot of these lows here that can be kind of intense. But you can play around and sort of mix this to taste. Even take this mix out. You could just get like slightly different versions of this sound. Alternatively, we can go and grab a Combs filter as well, which is very similar. And just, yeah, with a lot of these filters, you can kind of just go and change the way that the upper tonalities of this honk sound. So again, we're sort of, you know, we're changing all those frequencies that we shifted to the top a little bit earlier, and we're kind of scrunching them up, right? So you can add another filter maybe here, and then pick, let's say, like a Comb Plus. And then if you put the drive up a bit, might be a bit intense. So that's a couple of ways that you can still affect the sound. I think for now, it's not really that necessary. Maybe we do add like a tiny bit of saturation and make sure that the output doesn't suffer immensely, or maybe not. And then so lastly, let's kind of look at some fine tuning that we can do. So we can go back into the Serum patch and actually change a few things. So we can actually, we can put sync on this to get a little bit more higher tonalities in there as well. So let's maybe do that. We can go ahead and change the wavetables a bit. Just keep it as something nice and distorted. And we can use this frequency knob here as well to change the accentuated frequencies here. So maybe even this sounds pretty cool. And then also what you could potentially do is to give it a slightly detuned timbre. You could, even though this is, really, it's not playing at level, but it is affecting this frequency here, you can kind of use the fine knob to just make it sound like a little bit more dissonant. And yeah, so that is essentially how you create a sound like this. And yeah, with all these knobs here, you can create basically infinite variation. You can keep adding comb filters. You can keep adding different types of warp knobs, for example, to this wave here. You could even go and resample this and then, just do whatever you think is right. So I think that's it for today. That was the video. I hope that you learned something today. If you did, then please consider helping me out if I helped you out by pressing that like button. Really helps. I know it's just a click for you, but for me, it puts more of my content out to people like you, which is gonna make more awesome drum and bass in the world, which is essentially all that you and I want, if I'm correct. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. I upload videos super regularly. I take requests like you saw in this video today, so if you want to see something, put it down here. Nothing's too crazy to ask. Let's go. All right, without further ado, that's everything. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.